right. We're going to talk about a book that I was very curious about when I discovered it existed. And that is a book called Vampires by John Steakley. This is the. I should say this. This is the novel that the John Carpenter film, also called Vampires, is loosely based off of. They pull a couple characters, and like the beginnings are the same, but they go in opposite directions after that. What is the novel Vampires about? It's about a man named Jack Crow who has a team and they hunt vampires. They go to small towns and they drag out the vampires and kill them. Sounds a lot like Monster Hunter International, but take out all the fun and make it far more bleak and put more rules on the vampires. When Jack Crow's team are pretty much butchered by a master vampire, he has to assemble a new one to continue doing what he does. But the vampires are not done with Jack Crow. In his quest to get more people, he runs into an old friend who saved him back when he was a DEA agent. And this man's name is Felix, former drug runner turned bar owner. And they're gunmen because they find out that silver bullets will slow down vampires, so they need a gunman. And basically, Felix and Jack Crow are our main two characters. There are other ones. They're not worth talking about because, John Steakley is a strange author. He really only wrote 2 novels. He wrote a science fiction book called Armor, which he really wanted to be the next Star Wars, and that seems to be what he cared about. He was writing a second Armor novel when he passed at a youngish age. I think he was in his 50s. But this is his take on... it's his rebuttal of what Anne Rice did with vampires, with Interview with the Vampire and the subsequent sequels. They poke fun at that concept quite a bit. But at the same time, this book's kind of cringe. Jack Crow, I think both John Steakley and John Carpenter really think this character's cool. They may be the only 2 people in the world that think this person's cool. Jack Crow is like a really unlikable douchebag. I just didn't like him at all. Anything that was fun in Monster Hunter International is not in this book. This book takes a more bleak approach to what monster hunting, well, specifically vampire hunting, would be like. And it's not fun to read. I was expecting something that would be a little tongue-in-cheek and more in the vein of what Larry Correia wrote with Monster Hunter. But that's not the case. And, I appreciate that. There's some interesting horror aspects that they add with the vampires. Like, they're weird perverts, but they can't have sex themselves. And they can... once they feed on you, they kind of control you, but you don't necessarily turn. Which is something in another vampire book I'm going to be talking about next that is kind of similar between the two, which is weird. The vampires are straight evil in this, which I believe they should be. They're evil demonic creatures. I like the religious aspects of this book where it's like they're contracted by the Vatican. They are Vampire Hunters Inc. is what they are, what they're called, which people think is goofy, but I mean, like, it's in line with Monster Hunter International. And I like that the Vatican contracts them to just rid the world of this evil, and so they'll have a priest with them. So in this, we have Father Adam as a side character, and I like him. I think he's a neat, good character. because Jack Crow's not good. He's leading people to their deaths essentially, and he knows this, and he's a jaded a-hole. We get some interludes in this, mainly to establish Jack Crow and Felix's relationship, but also to give a character named Lynette backstory, because she's not all what that she seems to be. Again, it's just miserable stuff. Like, it's not a fun book, although, like I said, Steakley really thought that Jack Crow was the coolest, and Jack Crow always says rock and roll. I've never hated a term more than the saying rock and roll when you want to do something. All right, let's rock and roll. Or he'll just say rock and roll. And it's really annoying. Like, don't say that. Shut up. Overall, what did I think of vampires? I don't think I'd ever read this again. I think Steakley intended to write a sequel to this. It's left open for one, but I don't think I would have read a sequel to this. I don't think this was well received. It's bold for its time. This came out in like the late 80s, early 90s. But at the same time, it's not... It feels ahead of its time and behind its time. Because, like, we're coming off of how vampires were portrayed in the 80s, which is they go hand in hand with the AIDS epidemic, right? Lost Boys, The Hunger, films like that, they really deal with that sort of aspect of it, because, I mean, it's blood pollution, right? And that's kind of what HIV is, really. But we also have the romanticized, like, being satirical of Anne Rice's romanticism of vampirism, which, as I recall, the Anne Rice stuff started in, like, the 70s. And, like, I get that Larry Correia also makes fun of that, too, but his stuff feels more warranted because it's the late 2000s, and during that whole, the Twilight, I wanted to call it an epidemic, but I can't, you can't say that when I've already legit talked about the epidemic of HIV in the 80s. Just the cringe fest that was the whole Twilight obsession that my generation had. Those films are god-awful and those books are god-awful. So it's just, like, it doesn't know what it's gonna be. Like, it doesn't tackle the themes that the vampire stuff at the time would have. It tries to go its own nihilistic way, but doesn't. They're just better stories, vampire stories from this time period I would recommend over this than I would recommend this book. Like, it's just, you don't feel good after you read it. And I get it's horror, and you're not supposed to feel... Good doesn't always conquer evil. But you just are like, meh, that was something. I'm not going to say it's a full waste of my time, but it's just not very good, if you understand what I mean. It's very mediocre. So who would I recommend this to? I recommend this to fans of the film that are curious of a different perspective on the similar story. It's better than the vampire film sequels, especially the one that starred John Bon Jovi, because who thought that John Bon Jovi could act? I didn't think of that. Anyway, I give this like a 3 out of 5. It's very mediocre. And once I plan to review Armor next year. Once I review that, I'll give you a full analysis of what I think of John Steakley as an author. So, because I'm not impressed with this. So, anyway, have a nice day.